every time I use it. And I don't know, this is going to be great. This will be the first time this thing's ever been clipped to a light. If I break the crystal, will you pay for it, Carol?
Sure.
That's going to work really poorly. The cell phone recharger is having a dual purpose here. Yeah, you were starting to say you worked in the auto factories, or?
Well, I worked for GM. I worked for GM before. I got 30 years credit service with them.
In what plant or what area or what?
Flint Michigan. I was a plant supervisor of plant engineering.
Oh, okay.
You know, over maintenance and so forth at the Grand Blanc plant.
What was made there?
We made different components, doors for all 5 models.
Because at that time, like that same door that's on the same, except for the outer skin, maybe would be the same. Yeah.
Well, we made the whole works. We made the inner and outer, and then when we went to the assembly plant, they put the the glass and stuff.
Oh, okay, or the upholstery pads or whatever.
Regulators.
Well, you'll know this then. In those cars of the 60s, typically, between a power mechanism for a window and a manual crank, was the regulator and the teeth and everything just the same? It was just a matter of the motor gear attaching to that tooth for power, or the hand crank gear attaching to that tooth for
I really can't answer that. See, I didn't get into that end of it.
Okay.
What we done was designed and built or bought and put in and installed and maintained whatever it took to build
it together. Other jobbers fabricated the parts. Yours was an assembly.
Well, we had a stamping plant.
Oh,
Big stamping plant there too, and we stamped the inners, outers, and ultimately the big brace. So, when they started mandating that we
have some
put side impact bars in there.
How long did you work there? What years were you there?
From 1956 to 86.
Oh boy! So you saw the full range of just the whole transition of American automobile. Well, that's fascinating. I was wondering one of the songs that your son had copied us on the songs that had been released. You refer to Flint in the lyric of the song about the fighting with it, but I can't remember the title. I should be better, more up on this, about the fellow that ends up with Hard Luck Story going back north. And so I wondered, with Buicks being made in Flint, whether you'd had any, if in your actual job, if Flint was a part of your experience.
Well, see, we built quarter panels at the plant where I worked. Like I said a while ago, we built all 5 doors. For all 5 models. Deck lids for all 5 models, and front and rear quarter panels.
Huh.
The hoods, roofs, we didn't build that. So we built them. A whole lot of other kind of smaller parts, braces, stiffeners, the floor pans.
Okay. Now you would have seen, like, this little convertible we've got is actually kind of a unibody, like one of the first unibodies that were done. So you saw everything from frame through unibody going to those years.
Right.
Interesting. What is it, and that's always fascinated me too, for a changeover like that, were the assembly lines or the fabrication lines so flexible that the same basic hardware is the same on the line, but now you've got different mechanisms attached to it to handle those
used
different
to
things?
In the 50s up until about the late 60s. you know, you'd almost have a complete changeover,
Yeah,
body change.
Yeah.
It'd be drastic enough that in the summertime, the plants, assembly plants and everything would just close down for about a month or so to make a changeover.
Okay.
But then,
Okay.
about the early 70s, or late 60s, I don't remember exactly when, they started going on about a 5-year cycle.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
They'd only make a major change about every 5 years. The rest of the time, it'd just be some cosmetic changes from year to year, maybe.
Yeah. Outer sheet metal skin.
Yeah.
Same basic.
Maybe change the trim line just a little bit, or just make some maybe make some change in the looks of the grill, or
Yeah.
it wasn't nothing that amounted to anything really.
It's something they could show different in this year's catalog than last year's.
What we would do when we started on that program, didn't shut down, you know, for like
that long a time.
No, we'd work every weekend, and yeah, we'd make some part of the change this weekend.
Okay. Okay.
That
They were
we
subtle
could-
enough that you could do that.
That we could, yeah, and we could change back to finish out the model run, put the
During the week.
old parts back in, and so forth. And when they decided that everything should be the next year's model, why it was just practically a matter of
Transition was already done.
in a weekend of
Yeah.
going back in there and sticking guns and, you know, welding guns and
The rivet kind of thing, or spot welds.
yeah, welding tools,
Huh.
and or dyes. Maybe you just change, make a steel section of the dye if you want to change a trim line. Just
Okay. Just,
see.
that changes just slightly, so
Yeah,
that
you
you
just
can
take out
change that trim line.
the dyes that were built to begin with were, or if they weren't, they mill out an area
To receive it.
to where you can put the new parts in there. You know that put the new trim line,
That makes the change.
or and build inserts that would go in, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
to run the old one to.
And see, what I do in my garage is just nuts and bolts, and I don't have the welding capability or anything, so that's always fascinated me. But for what comes down the line, that's just like the nut and bolt with that spot welder there. You just stick that insert in there, tack, and it's the new deal. Fascinating. Well, see, that's what I was wondering too, because I was getting kind of a feel from what your son had told me about late 50s, early 60s, when you had come down to Nashville and had done some recording and so forth. But then I wasn't sure. But then you went back to Michigan and finished that career. Did you perform there too, or what was the basic?
Well, it was hell. There for a while, you know, I was. I'd been in music all my life, and you know, up until 1956, that's what I made my living.
That's what I had the
solely.
impression of. One of those earlier publicity photos looked like the kind of the western, country western swing or something like that, in the local scene in Michigan. Okay.
But then when I got married and got kids and wanted a little more income, so and steadier something, you know, music is sort of feast and famine, especially it was back then, and to a great degree it's like it still today.
Well, I don't think anything's changed.
Well, anyway, I hired in there, see, and sometimes if I wanted to if I got a booking like on a tour, I'd manage to get a leave of absence.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Or now when I was working on the Opry, what that amounted to was I'd leave there. I was working a second shift, and I'd leave there and come down to the Opry, and the way the Opry was set up then, and basically still is the same way today. Excuse me.
That's fine.
They have 2 shows. Like
Friday night Opry and Saturday night?
yeah, but on the Saturday night, or either one, they have 2 shows.
Okay.
You know, like from 6 to 9 and then 9 to 12.
Okay.
So they'd give you a shot on each half of the Opry. You follow me?
Uh-huh.
And then on Sunday, somewhere back at the line, going back toward home, up through Indiana, Ohio or something, or maybe over in the southern part of Ontario, I'd have a date.
Another gig
Yeah.
scheduled.
And I'd get back sometimes not until practically
In time
the next
to-
day in time, just barely in time to go back to what I call the snake pit.
Yeah. Well, by comparison, it had to be that way. That's
And
That's the thing.
after a while, my wife, she kind of got fed up with that schedule, because I was wearing myself right down.
yeah. Well,
See?
just the logistics of making that drive.
In the early '60s, what happened? Yeah, late '50s and early '60s. On the Grand Ole Opry, you had, well, you could name them on one hand: Ernest Tubb, Roy Acuff, Eddie Arnold, Bill Monroe, just a few that actually had fairly decent contracts with the Opry. Everybody else just got bare minimum scale.
Really?
And at that time, the scale was $12.50 for 15 minutes.
For that 15-minute show. Wow.
And
What you're buying there is the advertising of your music going over the radio, so that maybe
what
down
you
the
got?
line, the agent would want to book you, that you'd be a
Yeah,
bookable.
the main thing the Opry was, and still is, for that matter, they don't pay much nowadays, really, is publicity.
Sure.
The fact, if you say that you were a Grand Ole Opry artist, or that you had appeared on the Grand Ole Opry a few times, that'd
Give you credence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But as I kind of got ahead of myself, what happened, see, a lot of these other people around there, like Barty Robbins and some of the younger ones that had just been there a few years, they rebelled. They got to rebelling because they could go out it got to where they could go out on a Saturday night and
Fill a hall someplace.
and fill an auditorium somewhere and make $10,000 or $12,000
Yeah.
back then
Yeah.
against
Scale.
$50
to spend the time.
or so.
Yeah.
But their contract with the Opry stipulated that they had to appear 26 times a year yet on the Opry, see. But a lot of them, that is all they would do.
Yeah.
And some of them finally ceased doing that, you know, they just,
Too
they
lucrative.
got well enough known that
Yeah.
they could go out and demand and get make some pretty good money. So when that happened, what happened? They got a hold of me and a few other cats in my category, you know, that had records out that were getting played here, there, and yonder. No, nothing. Maybe we didn't have anything big, real big, but we did have something going.
And if you sang that song from the opera
and so-
stage, it was recognized. by the
Right, so what they done, they gave us what, they made us what they called permanent guests, which meant that...
You weren't obligated for the
Well,
26, you weren't contracted.
no, but anytime we wanted to come and appear,
You could.
we had to call in on a Tuesday before 5 in the afternoon if we wanted to be there
Saturday.
that Saturday night, see. And like I said, it is good publicity,
Sure.
and so
Well, and some of the broadcasting capability of WSM at that time, too, was pretty powerful.
well,
So
yeah,
how far north did that reach into, like, the Ohios and so forth? Like, when you were
oh,
saying
it
you
got
could get a booking on the way
at that
back.
time. They reached way up in Canada.
Sure.
I've been up way up around Geraldton, Ontario, and they'd come in clear as a
So when
bell
you're
up
saying
there.
you may find some booking in Ohio on the way back, that could be because they just heard
Yeah,
you last
yeah,
night
yeah.
on the stage, and now
Oh,
now
yeah, I
you're
used
there in
to- I
person,
used
so
to get
that's-
a lot of
that's worth
bookings.
something. Yeah.
I used to get a lot of bookings as a result of being on the Opry, but I never could seem to get a record that really clicked big. Now, I had one that got to number 5 in Canada. All my records, every record that I ever made, done better in Canada than it did in this country.
Huh.
You know, at this time, the time
Because you
when-
were, they could say you were Michigan area, like Detroit or whatever area, and you were more locally favored son kind of a thing then? Is that why it does better in Canada, or just country did better in Canada?
at this time, it was hard to give country music away. You know, rock and roll was the thing right then.
Well, and I was thinking, see,
George Jones, I remember old George saying at one time, "Oh, I wish I could have one to sell 10,000." Again, I don't know what I do. The last 4, 5 he'd put out, he couldn't hardly give them away. You know.
George Jones.
Yeah.
Well, see, what I was thinking too, trying to think back when I was first starting to get into listening to the radio and so forth, there were some crossovers. I didn't realize there were crossovers at the time. Skeeter Davis, End of the World, Eddie Arnold, Make the World Go Away, Bill Anderson, Still. Those were kind of the ballad part of the rock and roll station I was listening to. I didn't perceive of those being country. I've come to know since then that was the case.
Yeah.
But probably very rarely did something like that cross over to the point that you would get some kind of airplay on the popular station.
Not back then. It was very rare. But as long as I can remember, it seemed like Canadians like country music better than Americans do. I mean, there's places that I went to in Canada that I'd never heard of or never had been before. You know, I think, well, I'm gonna have 50 people here, and have 3,000 or 4,000 people. You'd have a good crowd.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. They just, it's, well, I don't know how to explain it. You could be practically a nobody down here in this country, and go up there and they'd tend to treat you like,
With the respect.
that you,
We're getting down here.
like you were somebody, you know.
Boy, well, that'd make you. Now, did that mean that when you were in Michigan, without having to come down to Nashville, that tours booking or whatever, like some of that earlier stuff, like would you be in some kind of a package deal with a few other artists, and you could use money touring?
Most
Canada.
Well, I toured over there a lot by
Oh, okay.
myself.
Okay.
But most of the time, I'd go there with the Grand Ole Opry package.
Okay.
Like as an opening act
Sure.
for some
Sure.
bigger named or what better known Grand Ole Opry artist. But I was, Bill and Boop. This was before I ever got on the Grand Ole Opry. If I went over, traveled with a Grand Ole Opry show.
But by that time, you would have had one or two of those local releases on record to the point that you had songs that would.
Oh yeah, I had records that they were just playing the hell out of over in Canada, but I was having trouble getting them played over here.
Well, now what, if you don't mind telling, for example, what were the royalties on a record sale that you as the artist or you as the writer did at that time?
Back then, the way nearly everything was based on a 45 RPM single. There wasn't in country music back then. At that time, there wasn't this near the number of 33 a third
Right.
RPM big albums.
The LPs, yeah.
LPs. Nearly everything was based or figured on the sale of a 45 RPM record, and nearly every contract for any recording company that you got with stipulated you would start out at 3% of the suggested retail price of the record, which was $1.
$1, so 3
So
cents.
you as a singer, you got 3 cents a record off each sale of the record. If you wrote just one side of the record, at that time the copyright law simply stipulated that on a electrically or mechanically reproduced piece of music,
Okay.
they had to pay 2 cents
For the right.
to the publisher,
Oh,
and the publisher split that with the writer, which you'd get a cent, another cent of royalty. There, see, it was nothing compared to what it is nowadays. But back then, where there was a lot of people that would have a record that didn't sell much. It wasn't nothing uncommon, and it still happens nowadays, where there's you might have a record that don't sell very much but gets a lot of play.
Yeah. Okay, so the BMI or ASCAP.
BMI and ASCAP royalties.
What do they?
Well, back I don't know exactly what they are right now. They're pretty good, but back then, if your record was played on a non-network affiliated station,
Okay. Local jockey here.
right,
plays
they had to
it on
pay
radio.
4 cents
Okay, per play.
per play.
Wow.
Or if they were affiliated with a network, they had to pay 6 cents.
Well, I wasn't aware it was that much. That could be.
Oh, that
Major.
that could
Yeah.
amount to some money even back then.
Was the reporting to the BMIs or the ASCAP?
They were pretty
Fair.
pretty accurate,
Okay. Okay.
because if they didn't, a BMI auditor would come into a station, and if they saw where they would monitor a station, well, ASCAP, BMI, both, they'd monitor it over the air. They had cats, that's all they done, just listen
Sit there
to
listening to the
stations,
radio
and then they'd
mark hash marks.
go in and monitor them. And
Big brother.
if they found out that you were cheating them, you weren't paying near the royalties that you should, logging as many plays on something, on the music that was licensed by them, they cut you off. That meant that probably, well, back then, I don't know how it is now, probably about the same way. It ran pretty well about 50-50 out of a top, say a top 40 format. About half the tunes in that top 40 list would be licensed by BMI, the other half by ASCAP. So if you got one of the other of your playlists, if you got the agreement revoked, and
there goes
half you. And people listen to the radio to they listen to this station over here
that commercial time you can
on
sell.
account of what they can hear on it. If half of what they have been wanting to hear or want to hear
taken away from them,
is taken away from them, they're going to switch over, someplace else.
Yeah. So that you'd have a vested interest in kind of trying to keep it clean then.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wondered about that because that seemed to me to be the weak link, because it just seemed like there could be such abuse of that.
You'd be surprised how little there is.
Interesting. That's
You'd be surprised.
As much shenanigans as can be played in it seems to be
And
in
of
the
course
music business that would be the where it wasn't.
These, well nowadays they do have a lot of problems with, I think they have more problems with counterfeit,
bootleg kind of
stuff. They produce it over in Asia,
Yeah. About that.
CDs and so forth.
Mhm.
They have a tremendous problem with that.
Yeah.
But over here and in most other countries, from what I've been able to find out, the performance royalty setup is still pretty clean.
Pretty clean.
See,
Because the
these-
booking agents, that would be pretty much known, pretty much public record and so forth.
See, like BMI and ASCAP both have agreements with what you call performance royalty societies in other countries.
Okay.
So if I managed some of my records too were like had overseas sales and overseas airplays on them.
What did your son tell me? What, Poland? No. Where?
One of that I had one old record there one time called Satan's, not Satan's Chauffeur, but
Satan's. Yeah. Satan's.
Chauffeur. I can't remember what was on the other side of that record. There's one Death Row.
Okay.
Was the one. It sold more records in Poland than it did anywhere else in the world.
Amazing.
But at this particular time, the communists were trying to make themselves, look great in the eyes of everybody in the world, and we, in this over here, we're still electrocuting people. They stopped it for a while, but then they're going back to it.
So that became a propaganda.
It was a propaganda, yeah. It was
tool.
a propaganda tool.
Interesting. Now, what label was that? Was that United Artists?
No, that was one on Mercury.
Mercury. Now, did they have distribution in the communist countries?
They
Or
didn't.
were
They
those
didn't.
records being
They didn't
smuggled
then.
in?
They didn't then because they didn't have any performance royalty
sure. Or any way of
agreements.
monitoring it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they do now.
Oh, man.
With Russia. We've got it with China now. That agreement was only signed just a few years ago.
So,
Almost every country in the world now. We don't know with there's still a few like Cuba, North Korea, Myanmar, which
are
Burma.
still totally.
Used to be Burma. There's a few countries in the world that the United States doesn't have a reciprocal agreement with.
Trade agreement situation on that
Yeah.
basis.
And so they can yank up anything wherever they can get it and take it over there and play it as much as they want.
And have no
And
obligation. Then get
And
nothing
you
from it.
can't do anything.
How does say for example, if somebody wanted to record one of your written tunes now, used to be, wasn't there a 25-year copyright lifetime, or copyright timing frame? That has been changed to 50 or something like that?
Used to, a copyright ran for a period of 28 years.
28 years, okay.
And then it could be renewed one more time for another period of 28 years, and after that it went into public domain.
Okay, so 56. I was thinking 25, 50, but okay.
And I believe, I'm not sure, now my boy has, he does a little bit of publishing.
Yeah, he and I were talking about some things that he's
got all the information over there. The law was changed in the late 70s or early 80s there. And I think a copyright, it runs for a greater period than 56 years now.
Longer time now.
I think it runs through the lifetime of the writer's immediate heirs, like sons, and like children. His immediate spouse, her lifetime, or the children's lifetime, and after that, it goes into public. Don't quote me, but I believe that's the way it is.
It's just, and, you know, I guess I see it from both sides. I guess it's fun for any artist to be able to play Down in the Valley or something like that and have no writer's royalties required. But the way that so much of earlier pop music has continuing life nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
My son, high school junior, can get just excited about some of the rock music that I bought at his age. It seems to be so unfair that there's a definite time frame after which you, as the creator of that work, no longer can gain benefit from it.
Yeah.
That just
Most
doesn't
guys
seem
sort of
right.
like patents, you know, after 17 years,
Yeah.
patent goes into public domain, and
It just doesn't seem.
it don't seem fair.
No, it does not seem fair.
Uh,
Yeah.
And as a writer, it used to be and still is. See, the copyright law specifies, did back then and does now, still specify a minimum royalty that has to be paid for each reproduction of a piece of music, you know, that's reproduced electrically or mechanically. Now, if you write something and some cat over here wants to record it, the first time that piece is recorded, whoever records it has to have the writer's permission. That gives the writer, him a little bit of an advantage. He can say, well, now wait a minute, if you really want this, let's get together with your recording company and so forth here to make sure that I get more than the minimum stipulated royalty. But once you give permission for it to be recorded,
That first time,
then anybody in the world that wants to can record it without your permission,
and you get
as long as that minimum royalty is paid.
And does you recording your own work the first time also count as that first time?
Well, you can't pay yourself more.
No, but I mean, because you're only going to get that, there's only that much of the pie after the and so forth.
Well, you might be able to negotiate something with your recording company if they really
Believed in the
wanted
song.
you to record that particular piece of music. If you said, well, I ain't going to record it unless I get 10 cents as opposed to 5, we'll say.
Well, then you're going to do this song. Yeah. Well, that's what I was wondering, if it was the first time after the original artist may have done it, or if it was the first time it was recorded for that reproduction.
Now after,
That really tells you how much of a business it is as opposed to an art.
yeah, it's strictly business,
Yeah.
and it's not so much like almost anything else. It's not so much what you know, but who you know.
Has to be. Just
Back
has to be.
when I was in the business, see, one of the things that I done, I managed other cats too, and I produced a lot of other records for other people.
Now, this back in Michigan, or this down
In Nashville, I always came to Nashville to do it.
again in Studio
We
8?
had nothing, no studios or the caliber of musicians
There you go. Yeah.
in Michigan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody that was anybody that could play anything and play it right, you might say, went to lived in Nashville. Oh, there was a few places. There were some pretty good musicians in New York, few in Chicago, and a few out around Bakersfield, California,
Yeah.
and around L.A. But by and large, Nashville was the Mecca. That's where they all went.
Yeah.
And back then, like I said, you had to know somebody, and it helped immensely if you were a Mason.
No kidding. A fraternal organization gets you in the door. Unbelievable. How do you find that out? You land in town and you join the Royal Order of Masons. How do you find that out?
Well, I don't know. I belong to the Mason. I've been a Mason ever since long before I ever started going to Nashville and producing anything. But I don't know how to explain it. It's just I became aware. I noticed it. Practically everybody that was on the Grand Ole Opry were Masons.
Wow.
You couldn't hardly.
Never heard that before.
Well, I don't know how it is nowadays, but back then, I'm telling you the truth, you couldn't hardly, unless you were a Mason, you might as well forget trying to talk to anybody about putting you on the Grand Ole
Starting
Opry.
anything or opening the first door or anything.
A Mason is not, according to the tenets of Masonry, supposed to use Masonry for any kind of personal benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, there was mutual benefit, you see.
yeah, I guess that's what
you could rationalize it that way.
Yeah.
And if it produces a generous attitude towards your brothers, why?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I had not heard that,
Never
but I guess that
have.
doesn't surprise me. That's the quintessential example of
In all the stories about different people getting their break,
first break. Yeah.
it's never been, wow.
Well, you got to have a little something. But it's still, in this day and age, more important who you know as to whether or not you're going to get a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I'm gonna see what we've got here. We're still going, it looks like.
It's something that in a way is I kind of hate to admit it or say it,
Yeah.
but I'm just telling you the truth.
Well, but that's like you say, it's the way it is in any business.
Well, when I worked at General Motors, you didn't stand a chance of going but just so far unless you were a Catholic.
Really?
You ought to see the politics that's played there.
Really? Now that's what I was going to ask you too. When you were saying you would take leave of absence, were you unionized? Was that union?
Well, I worked for the union, in the union, about 7.5 years. Then I got on salary.
Okay.
And,
okay. So because of the salary basis, you'd have that better advantage to have the leave of absence.
I could. When I was on hourly rate, I didn't have any trouble getting a leave of absence.
Because there'd always be somebody there that wanted to take the place for that time frame.
I never did. Well, the most I ever asked for was 30 days. At a time. There was several tours that I went on for a solid 30 days, you know. But most of the time would just be a week. Make a little tour up through Canada or out across the country or somewhere for a week. And,
now, did you drive your own car?
And a lot of time I used my vacation. Vacation.
Okay.
I booked tours. I had 6 weeks of vacation time.
Boy.
Did I drive my own car? Well, I did car and bus for a while. I've been on other tours where the tour operator, provided the transportation.
Okay.
Like I used to work a lot of shows for Irving Fell. I don't know whether you ever heard of him.
That may ring a bell, but I could be stretching here.
Well, Irving Fell, back in those days, he promoted all kinds of shows, country, rock and roll, and rhythm and blues. I worked for him on country shows, on country tours, and rock and roll tours too. The last one I worked for him was in 1958, January of 1958. And at that time, I'd heard him say several times, especially on these rock and roll tours, back at that time, we always had 5 or 6 of these doo-wop groups, black groups that had just come straight from the cotton patch in Mississippi to Chicago or somewhere, Detroit, and got them hit record, and they really, and so help me, they didn't quite know how to conduct themselves.
Of course.
Out in public.
Yeah, out in public for the first time,
And I've heard old Irvin say several times, I swear I'm going to get out of this music business one of these days and get me a trained dog act or something.
that I can control.
Yeah. Well, you know what he done? In early part of the 60s, I can't remember the exact year, 60. It seemed to me like it was 61 or 62. He bought the old Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus.
Maybe that's where I've heard the name, because I just watched a documentary about that.
And he took it to Europe. When he first bought it, he took it right out of this country to Europe, and he took it to a lot of them communist countries at the time. I don't remember when they brought that circus back to this country. But see, old Irving, he died in the early 70s there, 73 or 74. His son, Kenneth, well, the Feld family still own the circus, but his son, Kenneth, runs it. Now, he ramrods the deal. Now, if you ever see next time you see a sign advertising Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, if you notice, it'll probably say Kenneth Feld, F-E-L-D.
It could be.
Presents the Ringling
Next
Brothers
time we
Barnum
see
and
it,
Bailey
yeah.
Circus.
Yeah.
And anyway, I guess I said all that. What what I was getting at, when I worked for old Irving, well, he always provided transportation. And it was always a big show. We usually traveled on 2 buses and had 2 trucks to haul our axes and
Travel with the
sound
whole,
equipment and so forth.
you know, travel with all your equipment, all your backup musicians and so
Yeah.
forth. Some of these shows would book the local.
No,
Group to
Irving,
pick up
all
three-piece
the
vacuum
shows
or-
I ever worked for him, he usually carried an 18-piece orchestra.
I'll be a son of a gun.
And then other acts, maybe like the Everly Brothers, or Buddy Holly. I remember Buddy Holly. I was on tour with him one time when Buddy was on the tour.